That.
Yo, what's up, everybody? It is 12 noon on the dot here with Pastor Daniel and Pastor Tony. I hate to throw out ideas about, because people, when you do stuff like this one time, they say, you need to keep doing it. And we're all busy people. And look, we have no problem, with sharing our heart, sharing our thoughts and stuff like that. But I was going to say, man, this looks like a pop. We can call this the Oreo podcast. Pastor Daniel, you in the middle.
It's so funny. Somebody said that to me the other day. They said
Oreo Ministries.
I tell you, they have the real thick white stuff. What's that one called? Extra filling.
Right. So it gives you the reason to stay fluffy if you want to be fluffy.
That's right. COVID fluffy.
Yo, what's up, everybody? It is good to see you guys coming in the room. Say what's up in the comments. Pastor Davis, good to see you. Let's go, man. Yeah, we call it a double stuffed Oreo. That's what we call it. Double stuffed Oreo podcast. And then we could, make sure that it is like designed with an Oreo double stuff on it. Yes. Like it's a whole brand.
I love this.
Hey, we might get sponsorship.
I guarantee it. I bet they'd be calling us. Oreos would be calling us. Because, a lot of them are in trouble right now.
That's right.
They're like, we're in.
Addressing racism.
And cookies.
Using cookies to address racism. Like that is, I think we owe something.
Somebody's going to get offended at that. So,
hey guys, it is a joke. We're brothers. Okay.
Come on. And, let's laugh a little. Come on.
That's right. So do us a favor before we get started with today's conversation. Would y'all please share this video just so that it can get out? I mean, I was pleasantly surprised by the amount of people that watched last week's conversation and the amount of feedback. I mean, like the conversation last week was just crazy.
Yeah.
And people really seemed to enjoy the conversation. And I will have to say that Pastor Daniel was the MVP of last week's conversation.
That's awesome.
The MVP of the conversation. Although this is a serious, topic and subject, and there's a lot that really needs to be unpacked. And yes, it's difficult. Right now we're doing everything we can as pastors to be light, love, revelation, and to be able to address the difficulties. Like I just feel like every problem the world has, the church should definitely be present with ideas and answers. Yeah. I don't believe that God put us in the earth to detach from the difficulties in this world, but to actually be his hands and his feet and to be solutionists. So although this is a tough situation, tough thing that we have to deal with, I think it is important that we tackle it together as brothers and y'all see the interpersonal relationships that we have. So appreciate y'all sharing. Share your thoughts in the comments. And maybe this week, if you have specific questions, type those in the comments. And one of these very smart gentlemen will take your questions today. So just for somebody that might be new, that don't know who you guys, can y'all take a second to introduce yourselves to everybody's watching today?
Yeah. Well, my name's Daniel Taylor, and I'm the lead pastor at Elevation Church here, just right outside of St. Louis, in a little, I guess it's not even a little town. It's more like just kind of integrated in the city, but it's Fenton, Missouri. So not too far from the city, but that's where our church is. So.
And I'm Tony Gilmore, Senior Pastor Director of the St. Louis Dream Center up here in North St. Louis. It's like north is up. I just thought I'd let everybody know that directionally. And but just glad to be here. Love these guys, man.
I'm Antoine Jackson, and I'm upper. All right, so Pastor Tony is up. I'm upper.
Yes.
About 7 whole minutes.
That's right. 7 whole minutes upper. In St. Louis, Missouri, I pastor the Equation Church. So last week, we just kind of left off just talking about racism, our thoughts. And I don't want to be too spicy today, but, we have, over the past week, we've heard some, I call them snafus being said. Some snafus, some language that has been used that we're seeing that I'm not a cancel culturalist, okay? I'm not the guy that cancels people, right? But we have been hearing a lot of even companies and even some pastors that we dearly love saying some statements that's raising some eyebrows. You know, people going, fam, where you stand on this situation? So talk to me about, okay, let's do this. As a pastor, how difficult has it been for you to address racism? And as a pastor, what is the pressure of having to find the right words so that like as you're stepping around these landmines and you don't want to say the right thing, the wrong thing, you're trying to convey your heart, but you have some fundamental things that you believe. Like how has this time been for you as a pastor addressing the subject?
Wow. Well, Tony, you want me to go or you want to go?
Yeah, you go first.
All right. Well, I think about like in war, sometimes if the enemy knows you're coming, they'll put a bunch of landmines in in the field that you're walking through. And they'll put landmines all over that field because they don't care if they blow you up or who they blow up. They just want to make sure that somebody's going to blow up.
Yeah.
And as a pastor, I feel like that's what we're walking through right now. Now, I don't know if that's for everybody, but I do know that there are these landmines that are placed out there, and everybody is on edge. Everybody's kind of concerned. I mean, I'm even seeing reports of like celebrities. It's kind of interesting. They're having people like scrub their Twitter pages. Like, you know what I mean? They're looking back years.
Yeah.
Because it's all about, honestly, it's all about self-protection, just to be honest. And, they're kind of protecting themselves and whatever. And, because in cancel culture, you could have said something 10 years ago and actually grown up a little bit. And the next thing you know, you're being hammered for it. And we've seen that in the Black community, and we've seen that in the white community, and so for me, I found it very challenging. And honestly, I think it's sad. I think some of it's sad because we know some of these men and their hearts and the work that they're doing for the kingdom. And just because they said it the wrong way, it doesn't mean that somehow they should be like hauled off into some room and dealt with. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be addressed or they shouldn't come out and say, hey, yeah, I probably should have said that differently, or I think it should be that. But for people just to kind of malign their character or whatever, I find it really difficult. I find it really hard to even enter into it. Because Lord knows I've said things in my life that I regret or I wish I could take back, or, but the biggest thing that I would throw in there is humility.
That's it.
In other words, if I did say something or I've done something, all right, I hear you. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean I'm completely bad. It just means I misspoke. And I wish we had allowance for that right now, because, man, we just don't have any civility anymore, man. We can't even have conversations. If I disagree with you or even bring a nuance to a conversation, somehow, it's us versus them. It's me against you. And I just don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, I think we have to be a little bit more thoughtful about that, Because here, let me finish this, and I'll be quiet. I know I'm talking a lot. Is if we don't allow for that, okay, then what happens is it creates an environment where people don't learn and they don't get educated because they're afraid to even engage the conversation. Because if they engage the conversation and they mess it up just a little bit, they're going to get hammered. And so it creates fear, not excitement to learn something different or new. And I think we've got to allow for people to make mistakes so that they can learn and get better, because we got to fail forward. Because if we don't create a place where people can learn, I guarantee you this isn't going to change.
That's it.
I guarantee it. If we don't allow people to make mistakes and then enter into that with grace and love, and if they're willing to learn, come on. That's good. That's what disciples do. That's what the people of God should be about.
Okay. What you think, Pastor
Forgiveness.
T?
Yeah, that's it. And I have a friend of mine who is a white guy that pastors a church in Indiana, and he has a multicultural church. And he said this when we were on a Zoom call a couple of weeks ago. He says, "I'm terrified." He's like, as a white pastor of a multicultural church where I love everybody the same. He said, "I'm afraid if I say one wrong word, it could fall like a house of cards." And my wife and I were having this conversation, and it's like, you know what, to navigate this in this season, being a white pastor, you just have to be so careful now. It doesn't matter what your heart is or even what your body of work is in a community. It's like if you say the wrong thing, people are not as forgiving. And I think that's a sad commentary for the church. I can understand, the world doesn't have any other context, but for some of the guys that are making ignorant statements, or what I call it, statements born out of ignorance and maybe some in pride because they are used to their words being taken a certain way and it's been gold. And it's like, hey, you're wrong. Can I just say this? Because I got to say this. For some of the statements that's been made, I asked this question. I said, you have no Black brother or sister around you to help you craft that statement better? You have no one of the African American race in your inner circle that you give the speech to, and they're like, "Don't say that. You do not want to say that." Because I'm sitting there, some of the things that I've heard, I'm like, where are the people that are supposed to be covering you?
Thanks.
That's really good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Because it's really an indication of a lack of diversity in your inner circle.
Ooh.
Some of the statements are made, and no one, either fear of the people that are diverse around you,
That's good.
or that you just don't listen, and you don't have people in your inner circle. And I think that for the church is probably one of the most dangerous things that I see happening.
That's good. That's really good. How many times have I called you, Bishop? Help me.
Help me.
Help
I'm
me.
like, fam, like, dog, don't
say that.
Like, I mean, and it's really interesting that even in a time like this, not saying that it's a problem, but because oftentimes white pastors haven't been forced to actually address this like this, because the world has not demanded our voice and accountability. I think that this is a time where it's really showing a lot of the mentality that a lot of our white brothers and sisters have had concerning this situation. Now, I'm kind of like on the fence about it, because on one end, I feel like your worldview should be broad enough to be able to have language. So to me, it kind of bothers me if your worldview is closed. If you've not had enough of an experience in life, like that means you ain't listening to music. That means you're not eating different foods. That means like you are really in a bubble or an island that causes you not to be able to have the language to address injustice.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where, to me, I have a different definition between a multicultural church and a multi-ethnic church. Because I think that we're mixing up those definitions of multicultural. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because multi-ethnic means multicolor. Multicultural means multi-expression. And what I'm saying is, not oftentimes many of our churches have, many of us, blacks included, we don't have multi-ethnic experiences. We're not thinking about, or multicultural experiences. We're not saying, hey, what is unique to your heritage and your lens that we want to incorporate into our worship experience.
Yeah.
Right. So not just having blacks at the table. And this is what I've been saying to a lot of evangelical pastors. It's not enough just to have blacks at the table. Right. It's not just enough to be able to say, hey, I have them at the table, so, hey, we get a pass because I got black people on staff and I got black people on stage. Like, that's not good enough. Right. I'm just saying, we got to insert it in the conversation. But is their mind embedded in the fabric of the organization?
Yeah.
are their cultural expressions accepted in the experiences of the church? And so that's why I think that racism is really robust, and why I have been challenging. I've been very forward about challenging evangelicalism, because it's not just the doctrine or hyper doctrine of morality that I think they need to adjust. I think they also need to adjust also in their idea that just because I have blacks on staff, that it gives me a pass to be able to say things that I think will give me a pass. And then when I say it, people go, "Nah, fam, no, bruh, that ain't right."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I even think sometimes as pastors, we think like pastors and we don't think like missionaries. And what I mean is, as a missionary, I'm always examining the culture I'm around, trying to enculturate the gospel in that particular context.
Yep.
And so when I stop thinking like a missionary, I become less curious. I become less interested in knowing someone else's experience so that I might impart the gospel into that environment. I stop asking questions. I stop learning. I mean, who here has ever been in a new environment and asked those people, whatever they are, whatever their color, whatever their race, whatever their culture, and asked them, "Hey, can you teach me a little bit more about your experience?" And they've been like, "Get out of here, punk." Nobody's doing that.
Right.
I mean, nobody. And I think when we process the world as missionaries, which we all are,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to be a learner. It's a lot easier to have friendships. It's a lot easier to cultivate these relationships that are going to help us and it not turn into tokenism or anything like that.
Right.
It's much more about creating relationships for the kingdom. And I just think when we shift out of that mentality, you know, where we're just pastoring our little church and we stop thinking like missionaries, that's where we get in trouble.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I heard this statement this past week that I think also we've run into a ditch. And this may not be the most popular statement, but I believe it with all my heart. I think we've done the job of putting our ethnicities above kingdom.
Yes.
I
Wow.
think that we see, I believe, and I heard Tony Evans say this, and he said it in such a powerful way that, you know, whatever goes in front of a noun, the adjective that goes in front of a noun modifies the noun, meaning changes the noun. So when I say that I'm a black Christian, I'm a white Christian, what I'm saying is I'm modifying my experience of Christianity to fit the adjective. So if it's black, I have a black expression. If it's white, I have a white expression. And what we've gotten away from is a kingdom mentality that says, it's not that I'm a black Christian or a white Christian, it's that I'm a Christian that happens to be black. I'm a Christian that happens to be white or Hispanic. And when we can get back to the kingdom mindset, now the church says this, and this is what God showed me the other day. If this was an issue where whites were dealing with systematic racism, you know, inequities and all this stuff that we've talked about, it would still be a problem that all the church has to focus on, because if any of us are hurting, all of us are hurting.
Wow.
But because we've gone into our corners and said this is a black church or a white church, we have now been defined by our ethnicity rather than our kingdom mandate of who we were created to be in the first place.
That's so good.
So what you're saying is, Pastor Tony, that our overall philosophy of the way we interpret our church experiences need to be impacted as well. To deal with racism, we have to deal with the overall philosophies that a lot of us have embedded in our mentalities as okay.
It's true. I mean, we all got the same mom and daddy. Adam and Eve, we all got the same mom and dad.
Right.
When you take it back there, before we were ever placed in whatever continent, before we were ever put in whatever area, that is our genesis. Okay. And we get lost. And I'm not saying like our histories are important. We got to know history to be able to move forward. But I think we stop history and don't take it all the way back to where we began.
Okay.
We all focus on where we began. Adam and Eve are it.
Yeah.
And we all came from them.
So I'm going to be the devil's advocate and ask this question, because when you say, okay, black Christian versus white Christian, and and of course, you know, we're using the term Christian very loosely.
Yeah.
I personally use the term Christian very loosely because the term Christian was actually used as a derogatory term,
Right.
as well. Right. So we have taken on the label of Christianity and we have accepted that as a broad stroke of our faith when we turned something that was meant for negative and we turned it into something that was good.
Right.
Of course, you know why people have a problem with the N-word. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like we took something that was negative
Yeah.
and we turned it into something that is hip hop, you know what I'm saying, or a fundamental address in the way that we address each other. So that's a philosophical conversation that if y'all feel like having today, we can. But you don't want to talk.
It's like, no.
Come on, Pastor Dan, you don't want to talk about that. But I'm saying, because Pastor Tony, you bring up a point that I find myself struggling with is the overall philosophy.
Yeah.
Because if we draw the wrong conclusions, then how can we solve the real problem? So, you know what I'm saying? Racism is a part of the problem. It's what we're dealing with. And I see some comments today. Somebody says, has the church in North America ever had a kingdom mindset? Mm-hmm. The church here was founded on the ideals that white is best or better.
That's Pastor Dre right there.
Like
from the north side.
I agree. I understand, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, as a culture, as a civilization, we don't embrace the kingdom mentality because we have a democrata. We literally have a Greek and Roman society.
Yep.
That's a republic.
Yep.
But when you start talk to people, they kind of go, now here you go trying to get deep. And it's like, no, actually, I'm trying to draw out to you why you come to conclusions about the problems that we have. And you say you want to solve these problems, but a lot of it is embedded in our philosophical ideas about church anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And we get locked into, this is the way I do church. This is the way we do church. And listen, I get it. When I went over to Uganda, the thing that was mind blowing to me was to walk inside a Ugandan church and I heard Hillsong. And I'm like, well, dang. Wow. I did not expect that. And I think sometimes we definitely have forgotten at times where we originally came from. True. And when we can get back to where we originally came from, we can now see that racism isn't just a black issue, a white issue. It is a kingdom issue that we all have to attack together. I watched the movie Selma a couple of days ago, and the thing that jumped out at me was that the church led the change. Okay. The church led the change, and the church's expression was white, black, Hispanic, and anybody who believed in the same cause and the same fight. And it's like, we have to get some of that back because that's what began to move the needle in the United States.
Got it. Somebody put in the comments, please address the education and the continued education of leaders in the agency defined as the church. So basically, I think what they're saying is, and if I'm not saying it right, I'm in my watch party over here as well. That I think that what they're saying is, I think there is a misdefinition of the church's expression. Like, are we a mission-oriented agency or are we a ritualistic agency? Like, I think one of the reasons why you said the church led the movement, like a perfect example, the church led the movement because I think they had a mentality and a philosophy that church was not a service.
Yes.
Right? The church is a mission. Yeah. So out of that philosophy, they said, look, we got to lead change. Yeah. Where did we lose? I mean, okay, we got the fall, but where did we lose this burden for our comfort? Where did we misplace it? And how can we get it back?
Pastor Dan, you want to?
Well, I don't want to take that. No, I'm listening on a lot here because I may say this may not be a popular position. And I think the church spends a little too much time asking sociologists and politicians and other people what we think.
Yep.
Wow.
I don't need sociologists to define for me what racism is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And matter of fact, their definition of racism, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily line up with the Bible because it devalues people.
Yes.
And so my opinion is that the Bible needs to be our guide.
Yeah.
And so often we allow all of these extracurricular disciplines to influence and add input into what we believe. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be educated and know what's going on, but ultimately we need to be able to process that data and come to a biblical worldview.
Yeah, that's it.
And so many people I know have a scientific worldview. They have, all kinds of different worldviews, but it's not necessarily a biblical worldview.
Yeah.
And if you study the scriptures, there are certain conclusions you come to about human beings, going back, like regardless of whether it was Adam and Eve or whatever, just talk about creation.
Yeah.
God created people, and he did it for a reason. And we have to remember what that reason is. I mean, and you see it as like he created people to worship him. And he wanted them to do it freely because he wants us to love him. He didn't force us to do it. And then you fast forward to Revelation and you see that church is represented by everybody from every ethnic, every culture.
Yep.
Is that we are called to do that. And the fact that, in the United States that we live in, I guess they say Sunday is the most segregated time, and whatever. We gotta do something about that. We got to continue to do something about that. And that's where we have to. So I don't know if I completely agree. I think that North American church, there were seasons where the North American church they thought like missionaries. But ultimately, I think when we model the church after the government, come on.
Yeah.
I just came out of a church that modeled their entire system out of the government. They had an executive branch and a legislative branch and a judicial branch. And I'm like, I don't see any of this in scripture. Come on.
Yeah.
That's American model for the church. That is not what the Bible teaches.
Yeah.
So we've wrapped our morality in our governmental structure, and that's what we're calling church.
Yeah. And it's funny to me that we don't even, like some people is like, yeah, that seems normal to me. Have you read the scripture? There ain't nothing about that that's normal. Checks and balances. What are we talking about? There's a leader, and that leader has anointing and authority to speak into these matters. And he should be surrounded, or she should be surrounded by people that reflect the character and nature of God, which is multi-ethnic, multicultural. It's all of those things. And I need to have those people, whether they're in my church or just friends that I have. I've got to have those influences in my life.
It's true. It's true.
What you think, Pastor Tony?
And, I think that's where this part, it has to be intentional. Like it can't be, I hope that I run across somebody that's different than me. This one statement jumps out at me. When you're the majority in any place, well, let me start by saying this. When you're the minority in any place, you have to go to where the majority is to learn how things function and flow and how that culture really operates. But when you're the majority, you never have to spend time with the minority. The only time you spend time with the minority is if it's on purpose. And I think that's what can happen sometimes in our relationships is that, when you look at a world, and let's just be real, where a lot of the CEOs, where a lot of the Hollywood producers are of a certain ethnicity, then you're like, I want to break into this. Then as a minority, you have got to learn how to connect with those that have power. But what doesn't happen often is that the majority doesn't always try to connect with the minority to make sure that the systems and things they have in place connect with everybody. They can just stay in their offices and stay in their buildings, but so that's all I'm gonna say right now.
And you're right, Pastor, because if you look at our country, every 4 years, every 6 years, we change leadership, or every 8 years we change leadership, every 2 years we change leadership. And I'm not speaking to that necessarily. I'm just saying that what happens, and this is why it's not a kingdom mindset. What happens is the people in power tend to oppress the people they won over.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And so anybody, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or whoever you are, or whether you were voted in to be bishop, there are some people that use their power to oppress other.
Why you got to say bishop?
Okay.
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
They use their power and their authority to oppress the loser.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why what Nelson Mandela did was so countercultural, is that when he came into power, he worked really hard in the majority to not oppress the minority that used to be the majority.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And we rarely have seen that in history.
Yeah.
Rarely. That's what made him so unique
Yeah.
and different. And so my point is a kingdom mindset is that when we get in power to serve people, not hurt people.
That's
Yes.
it. That's it.
And so if I'm on the winning side, so to speak, then I'm supposed to help people. I'm supposed to love people. A matter of fact, I'm supposed to go listen to the minority
Yep.
and find out what's going on and understand how I can even help them as I help the majority as well.
And you know, it's like, because we're in this now, we're in. And when we, that's why kingdom is so important, because in the kingdom, Jesus teaches us that, you know what, the greater or majority shall serve.
Yes.
And we're talking about numbers, not in image bearers. We're all image bearers. When you're talking that number, it's like when the kingdom people have that mindset, whether who is white, black, or whatever, we actually get a chance to pull everybody up. My daughter showed me something the other day that she told me, my youngest daughter is a senior at Mizzou, and they're walking through a lot at Mizzou. It's just nuts. We were talking about it. They did what's called a privilege walk. And so the privilege walk, I didn't understand it until she really began to explain it. The privilege walk was set up to say, okay, this is what happens with people who have a head start. Mm-hmm. And so they begin to ask questions. How many of you kids have both parents in your household? If you have both parents in your household, take 2 steps forward. If you didn't have to rely on scholarships to go to school, take 2 steps forward. And as they begin to just ask these questions, you begin to see this larger portion of students yards ahead, with these other group of students that didn't have the same advantages way behind. And so my daughter says what that did to them is they felt demoralized until this one thing happened. One of her sorority sisters who was back there, everybody was like, we're so far behind, there's no reason for us to even try. But one of her sorority sisters was like, no, I'm going to beat everybody. And this sorority sister who had to stay still while all of these kids went forward, ended up beating everybody to the goal of $100. But here's the thing that nobody paid attention to. She had to run faster and work harder to get there. And when we can understand that difference, then we look at things like affirmative action. We look at things that help close the gap, not as this thing just to take Black people and give them a handout, but it's taking the 200 meters that they were behind or that we were behind and saying, let me help you catch up, because we're all image bearers and all things equal. We can run this race and we can all win. That's the mentality we've got to get to.
Man, this is good. I'm going to put some of these comments up here and give us an opportunity to kind of respond to some of them. What you're talking about requires sacrifice that most don't want to make.
Yeah.
Yes, I saw the video. Very powerful. Everyone has to be intentional about connecting, communicating, and learning more about those that we labor with. The word tells us to know those that labor among us. How can we know them if we don't reach out?
Yeah,
it's good.
Then over here it says, please address the education issue. Where do we educate kingdom-minded leaders for 21st century ministry? I guess maybe this will be the next, I'll pivot to this question for you guys as pastors, because many people are asking, where is the church? I personally believe that the church has always been present. Yeah. I find that anything that is oppressed is where the truth is. Right. And so I find that one of the reasons why the true church seems to go through a level of oppression and suppression of their voice is because I think there is a narrative that drives people to only want what they want to hear, itching ears. I think we've been in the day of itching ears. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Where we go to what is comfortable or what is convenient, not necessarily what is mission oriented or is teaching us or instructing us into discipleship. Right. Because it's It's easier. Like pick the Big Mac or go spend more money on healthier food.
Mm-hmm.
See, it takes more responsibility to stay on the course of health and education than it does on the convenience that just feeding you does. And I feel like that's part of the problem with just American Christianity and the impact that capitalism has had on our mentality about what growth looks like, what number looks like, because we don't even preach or even talk about maturity. We just talk about size points. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, if I'm big enough, then what people say is that success. That's the voice worth listening to. That's the pastor worth listening to. Then, you know, so that's a whole nother conversation, right? But I think that we're dealing with an appetite of people that themselves will reject people like us. Because if we were just talking about any other subject, this live would probably have millions of people watching the live, because it would directly appeal to the appetite of the people. So,
Bishop,
yes,
if we were angry, and showing another video making the point more valid, we probably have 2 million hits.
Yes.
But because we're walking through how can we bring this together? How can we bridge this and make things better? That's not as appealing.
Right.
And I can see, because I see it on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. It's like the crazy stuff is what's getting the most hits.
Right. So this is so that's the vantage point. I'm asking you this question from as pastors. This is not sexy, right? You already seen the fact that they're kind of cycling this stuff out of the news cycle. And now we're talking about a second wave of COVID. Right. So you're already seeing how it's already kind of shifted the narrative already. So it's not in people's face. So it's not necessarily something that is going to stay on their mind.
Yeah.
As a pastor, knowing that this is something that is going to continue to be a problem because it's really not fixed yet.
Yeah.
What is the solution? What are you preaching? What are you teaching? What are you changing? Like, how are you as a pastor going to commit to actually dealing with racism and injustice over a long term, so that when this happens again and they go back and click this video, we can say we don't have to scrub our timelines because we've been talking about this.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? We've been, having this conversation. So tell me, what are some of the things that you've been thinking about and maybe pioneering to actually be a solution to this problem?
One of the things that I had a professor say to me one time, he said, if you're going to do deliverance ministry, you better pack a lunch. And his point is that it ain't always easy.
Yeah.
To tarry in the spirit is not easy. And one of the things that I've been talking a lot about with my church is not identifying privilege as white, black, or pink or blue, just privilege in general, just privilege. And because as a believer in Jesus Christ, I am privileged.
Yeah.
And I need to make sure I use my privilege to do what God has told me to do, which is walk out my faith the way that the Bible explains it. And if I have all kinds of personal holiness, but I have no social holiness, then I'm just a clanging cymbal.
Yeah.
If I'm personally holy and I don't go to movies or drink or smoke or date women that do, then somehow that makes me right. And it's like, no, that makes me personally holy, but it doesn't make me socially holy. And I, as a privileged follower of Jesus Christ, I have a privileged position that requires me to walk that out in this world.
Yeah.
And I have to do that as an individual, and I got to get the people in my church to do it as well. And part of that is what we're doing right here, the conversations. My hope is that, you guys will let me preach in your church sometime,
Please do.
Come on. I'll preach in yours and you preach in mine, and we keep having conversations, and then we start working on the things we can work on. But it has to be a concerted effort, and it has to be something that's just even on our mind, because you're absolutely right, Bishop. once this new cycle's done, we're on to the new thing. And if we're going to deal with racism and injustice in our country and even in our churches, we better pack a lunch.
Yeah.
So good. For
me, because we're in an urban environment, I'm attacking it from the inside out. And so our attack is going to be, even though we have somewhat of a multicultural church, but it's predominantly Black. My goal is to equip and empower those under my leadership to renew the way they think.
Yeah.
No longer think like an oppressed person, to no longer think like a person who's been held down, but to begin to think, man, I am a child of the living God. And I'm a child of God. I don't care who hates me. I don't care who does not want me to succeed. What God has for me is for me. And I can bust through every barrier that's in front of me. And so because for us, it starts with training our adults to be that way. And then the second piece is we're attacking it through education. We are coming alongside St. Louis Public Schools, providing an after-school program that's going to have a kingdom focus. So while our kids are learning to grow academically, they will also learn the principles of God's word that will help even whatever may not be equitable. And so we're attacking this in both of those fronts, because the bottom line is, when our children get it, it changes North St. Louis 10 years from now.
Yes.
It gives us a future here that can impact the way this whole community looks.
Yes.
Well, and it's absolutely right. Because, I think I've talked to you, Bishop, about this. I don't know, but not just that. And I know we're going to mention the outreach at the end of the time, but that we're going to do collectively, but also the idea of, like, I've been rattling around my brain and I'm just getting real practical, is, us doing what we're just calling like First Saturday, where we come to Equation or we come to the Dream Center and we just are there. We're with people. We're with the people. And it's those kinds of activities that are really important, because if we're going to affect this, it's like, I think it was Eugene Peterson that said this, but it's a long obedience in the same direction.
Yeah.
And that's what we got to have. We got to have a long obedience.
Type that in the comments, somebody.
A long obedience in the same direction if we're going to see the change that we want to see.
That's it.
And that's good. Like that, I concur with both of you all. I think, one of the things that I've been trying to do is to lift the pressure off of the church. Look, I'm going to see if I can get it just a little bit, right? Just a little bit, because I think that what we're also dealing with is socialization, right? Because we have not made it the responsibility of parents to instruct and to teach their kids in righteousness. Yeah. So it's easy so this is where I've been on the fence, because it's easy to take the burden and the responsibility off of yourself and ask the question, well, what is the church doing? Yeah. And then my question is, well, what are you as the church doing?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Because if you aren't talking to your kids, talking to your husband and your wife, talking to your best friends, talking to your cousins, if you're not having that conversation of socializing them around truth, what we're finding is many people are then coming to the institution and then expecting for the institution to solve every problem. We're supposed to collectively, as a community of believers, solve this problem. You know what I'm saying? So like you said, the long obedience in the same direction. It is us linking arms, saying, look, I've done the hard work on my home front. Then I have a responsibility as a senior leader to make sure that I'm instructing and teaching people the right principle. So that means there are sometimes I have to bag up off of my expectations of my Sunday experience and actually teach them the Bible.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like, not care about, okay, my numbers metrics, my offering metrics. You know what I'm saying? All of that stuff that we have made important to our experience, but also being offensive or offending, right? With truth, not being mean-spirited, but saying, hey, you know what? You might need to think about and consider, you might have some mentalities about your faith that's wrapped in your Americanism that you might need to get back to kingdom thinking.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Bishop, go ahead.
So also challenging the mentality, and I call it taking the L, because I think sometimes all three of us understand that when we truly say what people truly need to hear, we take an L.
Yeah. Yeah.
Come
Yeah.
on,
You see what I'm saying?
type that in the line.
And that's what I'm saying. The people that are watching, this is why we need you all to stand alongside us and not just listen to us, but also talk to some of these people that you go to church with,
Yeah.
because they penalize us for telling the truth,
Yeah.
not giving, not showing up, losing morale, or causing issues. So then we have to find ourselves walking this tightrope of, okay, well, I better make sure I talk about relationships next month, because if I don't lift the spirit back up, budget is going to be impacted, right? Yeah. But that's another sad reality of trying to get people to actually get in that space of long obedience, because oftentimes people come to church for inspiration, not for education.
Come on.
So
No,
us,
right.
Working through that too.
Well, you're absolutely right, and it makes it more challenging, and I've noticed that a lot of times, we speak from a stage or we speak on these kinds of formats, and sometimes what happens is people won't assume the best about you. They won't assume the best about you, even though you've been teaching them for years, giving them truth straight and strong. They don't assume the best. They don't even have a conversation. They just kind of size it up and be like, well, I'm out of here. I can't believe they're talking about this stuff. Yeah. Like, come on, man, grow up, mature a little bit. And I was so proud of one of my members this week. This particular member, she came to me because there was something I said on this conversation that really bothered her. She was trying to process it, and I was so proud that she actually had the conversation.
Yeah.
And allowed me to speak into it and not just assume the worst, and it was actually a really helpful conversation. I think she's learning, and this is a white lady, and she's learning and trying to process all this data, because it ain't easy. I mean, this is not easy, and we got to be patient and gracious with one another. The only last thing I was going to say, Bishop, is our kids don't come out racist.
Correct.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things I've been so grateful for is my daughter. She cares about everything. I mean, Lord help us. I could cut down a tree and she's like, I can't believe you cut down a tree. That's right. God's, and what I love about her is that she reminds me to care, to care about all of what God has done. And I have to listen to the children sometimes because I've been hardened by the world. My social narrative has been instructed. Yep. And sometimes it's nice just to know what the kids think, because I think they can teach us too while we're teaching them.
Sure. It's true.
Man. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Pastor T.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I want to just make sure that is out there on the record so that people can know that the conversation has been had. And I've really been mulling this part over about the responsibility of the fact why God made us the way he made us. Like Pastor Daniel, he made you white for a reason. Pastor Tony, he made you black for a reason. He made me black for a reason. He was not like, whatever they come out is whatever it is, right? Because we understand the reality that he makes us in response to a problem. Our life is an answer.
Yeah.
Right, to a problem. So one of the things that I've been trying to think about as far as it comes down to when I use the terms white pastors, black pastors, or white churches, black churches, I feel like one of the things that we should address, I think, like from a white perspective, is that you help change and deal with the narrative of privilege while we're over here trying to teach people how to get out of oppression. Right? Because one of the things that I'm spending my life trying to do is to upgrade the mentality of people that have been impacted by oppression.
Yeah.
And what has been the hardest thing for me, the reason why I say, okay, I need your help. This is why I need your help. Because I'm dealing with people that have been so oppressed. The only thing they're thinking about are their basic necessities.
That's good.
So I spent all of my ministry trying to teach people into their identity so that they can start handling their basic necessities.
That's good.
But because I'm different in my perspective about how I handle my life, I become, quote unquote, almost an enemy. Because oftentimes, because of that proximity and that familiarity, right, they oftentimes take what I say as a grain of salt.
Yeah.
And because of that, it makes the work that I'm doing tirelessly. It's harder because I'm trying to get people to realize you can have more than you have. You can live better than you live. You can have more money than, right? So I'm trying to talk them out of oppression.
Yes.
And oppression makes people, what's the best way to, Lord, give it to me. What I have found is that oppression makes people, and I'm looking for the word, just give me 15 seconds.
Come on.
I need to find this word.
Help
Give
him,
it
Lord.
on, Lord.
Help him, Lord. Come on.
What is, okay, oppression makes people entitled. There it is.
Mm.
So what I'm dealing with is oppression that makes people entitled to the things that they say, look, I need food, I need clothes, I need shelter. So they'll come to a Pastor Tony or come to myself when we do an outreach, like, I deserve this.
Oh, me.
You owe me.
Yeah.
When it's out of the kindness of my heart and out of our ability to use our resources correctly to help you with your life's necessities.
That's good.
Okay, so I want to make sure that this is out here so that people understand that when we're talking about racism in the impacts that it has had on the impressive mentality, we're not blind by the fact that there's a responsibility on both sides of the party.
This coin is two-sided. And I thought about this like 2 weeks ago. I preached at a church in Kentucky, and it was you can say predominantly white. It was all white. Like there's two people in the whole service that were of color. And I remember when God told me what to preach, I was like, whoa. You want me to preach that here? And he had me preach a message called the Powerless Gospel. And one of the phrases was, a gospel without compassion is powerless. And God showed me this. I have never been sex trafficked. My daughters haven't. And I don't know anybody that's ever been sex trafficked personally. But the fact that sex trafficking is going on is horrendous. And because I'm a kingdom person, I got to do something about it. It's a place of empathy that tells me I'm walking in your shoes, trying to feel what you feel. And I feel like as we're walking this two-sided coin, what we're asking of our white brothers and sisters is to have empathy and put yourself in our shoes so you can understand and not just say, maybe maybe this group is just this or they're just that. It's like, no. To the people that have experienced it, it is a reality. But at the same time, we need our black brothers and sisters to have an empowerment mentality where they're like, you know what? This may have been mama's walk and daddy's walk and great granddaddy's walk, but this no longer has to be my walk. So let me change the way that I think so I can change the generation behind me. Because there is a point where we have to look at this and say, as African Americans, yeah, there are still some things that are out there that are repressive. Yep, there's still some racism that is out there, but I will not be the one that will be held back by anybody else's view. I want to come up no matter who does not, no matter who wants me not to come up. And when empathy meets empowerment, that changes a society.
Wow.
Somebody please put that in the comments.
Come on. That's good.
Pastor Tony said it here.
So good.
When empathy meets empowerment. Oh my God.
And that's my heartbeat. God's called me to be a bridge.
Yeah.
If I walk around angry, I can't be what God's called me to be. So God has called me to preach a kingdom message that allows my brothers and sisters that don't look like me to say, I don't know what you walk through, but help bridge the gap by communicating and let's having a conversation so I can understand. But at the same time, bringing the brothers and sisters that do look like me and say, hey, we're not angry. We're not going to walk around angry. We're going to use our anger and turn it into good. We're going to change the narrative by the way that we live and the way that we see ourselves. So
good.
Pastor Tony, please do a video, a blog, a podcast, whatever. When empathy meets empowerment, Pastor Tony, you just dropped bruh.
Well, glory to God.
Jeez.
So good. So
because
good.
it is a practical answer. It is saying, so somebody asks us what can a white man and a black man do? Bring your empathy.
Yeah,
I'm going to bring my empowerment, and we're going to bring that to an oppressed people.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah,
and we're going to get these people up. We're going to deal with their mentality. We're going to deal with their resources.
Yeah.
We're going to get these people up to understand that the way out of this is personal responsibility.
That's really good, and it's so good because it's like all of our contexts are different.
Yeah,
and so what I need to be preaching to my people, so to speak, might be different than what Pastor Tony or Bishop needs to be speaking. But so I love the nuance between those two ideas, because when I look at the scriptures and we see that Israel was oppressed for so long in Egypt.
Yeah.
It blows my mind every time I think about it, how long they were oppressed and in Egypt, and the effect that had on them, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. And so often we kind of think that, okay, just because somebody is physically free,
come on,
doesn't mean that they are spiritually or mentally free.
Correct.
And that's how the devil continues to oppress people.
Yeah.
And that's why God took them on a journey through the desert. That's why he wrote the first 5 books of the Bible.
Yep.
Is he was trying to make a slave people into champions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And his call for all believers in Jesus Christ is that you are a champion, and your mentality, your body, your physical, everything needs to be focused on that reality. And any kind of thought or idea or oppression or addiction or anything that is working against that has to be eradicated, because God's plan and design for his people was to be free, both physically and mentally, spiritually, emotionally, because that's at the core of the gospel. The gospel is freedom.
That's it. And when I think about this, it's like when I lose the victim's mentality and I take on a champion's mindset.
Yes.
I can look racism in the eye and see it as the spirit that it is, operating in individuals that allow it to operate in.
So
and I can say, you know what, maybe this bank's president is racist. And maybe this bank's president is racist. But because God's with me, I'm not going to stop at the first 2 no's. I'm finding a yes. There is a yes somewhere. I just got to keep going, because this is not going to hold me back. But when your spirit is broken, you walk through so much, you don't even feel like trying anymore. And if I can say it like this is the work that myself, Antoine, Andre, who's on here, other pastors who are pastoring at times predominantly African-American congregations, we're trying to awaken dead, broken spirits that can live again.
Yes.
Can drink again. You can do whatever God put in your heart, no matter who stands against you.
The bones are rattling.
The work of what we do.
Yep. That's
right.
it.
The bones are rattling right now.
I'm telling you, this is if anybody's like, what is a solution? I think you really need to watch this video, and I think you need to share this video with other people. Maybe you're a pastor, maybe you're a pastor, or maybe you are a pastor and you struggle with language or what the problem is. Watch these both of these videos, study them, take some notes, get in contact with us because we'd love to talk with you and do life with you.
Yeah.
Bishop, can I say one more thing? I know we're at our time.
Mm-hmm.
Is this okay?
Sure.
I was just going to say, I met my wife doing missionary work on an Indian reservation.
Mm-hmm.
And Indians are an oppressed people in our country, in our history, obviously. And we worked with the Plains Indians, and one of their leaders was one of their chiefs at the end of their season, before they were kind of just all rounded up and put in these places. He talked about how their hoop had been broken as a people. And if you've ever worked on Indian reservations, you can see that they were so oppressed at such a deep level that they were broken as human beings.
Yeah.
And when you're broken as a people and as human beings, it's really hard to pull yourself up out of a bucket, out of a hole. Yep. And I think the church has to understand that and have some empathy around that, because I absolutely believe God can rebuild that hoop.
Yeah. Yep.
But we're starting from -10.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're starting from -10 with some people. They're in a really tough spot. Yeah. And we gotta build them up before they're gonna go up. So
that's good. Well, yo, look, we are at 59 minutes, and so definitely know that these gentlemen, we all have a busy day, but appreciate your conversation, you guys that were in the comments. This upcoming Saturday, we are going to be doing an outreach called Being the Church. Mm-hmm. This is our response and our partnership as Oreo Ministries. I'm just joking, but as we should have branded it, but no, but as three leaders to say to the St. Louis community, like, hey, we're standing with each other and we're going to hold up our arms. It will be this Saturday from 9 to 12 p.m. or until supplies run out. Yeah. You can register. You can find the flyers on all of our pages. But the great thing about this Saturday is it is our response to our community to truly say, hey, we want to be the hands and the feet of Jesus. Yeah. We don't want you just to come to our church. We want you to know that the church is present. Amen. So if you want to volunteer, we still need people to help us pack boxes. We still need street teams to make sure that people are out there being aware and notified of the event itself. We need people that will help us with tables and chairs and making sure that all of that stuff is put out there and taken back. We need people that will smile and love and hug on people. Make sure that, of course, you have your mask and your gloves. We're not trying to put you out there. We're not trying to send you out there to the wolves. All right. But make sure you have your PPE items, but we want to serve the people. And so if you want to be a part of that day, please send an email. For you guys that are in the comments, do me a favor, type it the411@equationchurch.com. Thank you so much for you guys that have already committed to serving. We look forward to seeing you Saturday. Or if you also want to, Pastor Tony, if they want to help with some packing boxes, is there a way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can reach out to me at tgilmore, GILMORE, at stldreamcenter.org. Somebody put that in the notes as well. tgilmore at stldreamcenter.org.
Sweet. We could definitely tremendously use your help.
And I'm not sharing my email. Come on.
Oh Lord, I'm not going. We're not going. Sorry, not going to do it. But yeah, this Saturday, just so you all know, we will be having our pep rally at 7:30. So let's just say you don't want to send an email, you don't want to go through none of that stuff, but you want to help. All right, here's your fast track. Be at Equation Church Saturday morning by 7:30 at the latest for the pep rally so that you can get instructions on what we need for that day. So there is no way out. Either email us, go to the Dream Center, or show up Saturday. But let's be the church.
Come on. No, don't come to the Dream Center.
Email him. All right, so that you can pack boxes. But also, like, show up Saturday at 7:30 a.m. for the pep rally, and so that we can get our marching orders and change the world that day. All right. Man. Anything else, pastors, you guys want to add?
Mm-mm.
No, man.
Thank you for hosting this. Thank you for hosting this.
Great conversation. We got to do this over lunch or our podcast. Yeah, I just dropped the idea out there, but we busy. But I'm just saying. I appreciate and love you guys, man. You guys that are watching on our Facebook and on YouTube. God bless y'all, man. Until the next time, y'all. Let's change the world.
Amen. Amen.